Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Mannion, and welcome to our session on mastering the basics of the TI-84 Plus calculator. Today we'll cover the essential functions of the TI-84 Plus calculator from basic arithmetic to graphing equations. This is perfect for novice teachers new to this tool. Let's begin with a quick tour of the calculator. In the bottom left you'll find your power button. In the bottom right you'll find your basic arithmetic functions along with your enter. In the top right, you'll find your arrow keys, and in the top left, the second key. Now, the second key is one of the most important keys on the TI-84 Plus calculator. It allows you to access the secondary functions of other keys. When you press second, the next key you press will perform the function written in blue above it. For example, when I press second and then I press the caret button, my input is actually pi, as indicated in blue. When I press enter, I'm given the value of pi. Now, you also use the second key for turning your calculator on and off, for adjusting your screen contrast, and for quitting out of menus. To turn your calculator on, you'll simply press the on button on your calculator, and then to turn your screen off, you can press second and then on again to perform the blue function off. If you need to adjust your screen contrast, you can press second up to increase your contrast on your screen, or you can press second down to decrease your contrast, and repeat that as many times as you need. In addition, there is a mode button on your calculator to change settings. You'll most likely leave most of these settings as defaults, but you can change some of them as you feel necessary. Starting up at the top, Math Print versus Classic changes the format of your text. Normal, Science versus Engineering mode changes the format of your numbers. Float changes the decimal float value. Radian versus Degree changes how angles are measured. There's function, parametric, polar, and sequences. This setting tells the calculator what type of functions you plan to graph. In dot thick or dot thin mode, the calculator produces a graph by plotting only the points it calculates. In thick or thin mode, the calculator joins consecutively plotted points with a line. Thick or thin has to do with the thickness of the line style in y=editor. In sequential mode, the calculator completes the graph of one function before it graphs the next. In simultaneous mode, the calculator graphs all functions at the same time. Below, you'll have real versus complex numbers, and in rectangular form, we'll only be working with real numbers. Next, full horizontal or graph table. The full screen mode displays the screen as you see it when you turn the calculator on, and the other screen modes are split screens. The horizontal mode is for when you want to display a graph and the y=editor or the home screen at the same time. Use the graph table mode when you want to display a graph and a table at the same time. Down below, we have fraction type. The results display as simple fractions or mixed numbers. Answers. Your answers will be displayed as similar form as the import, or DEC displays answers in decimal form. Stat diagnostics. Turn this on so that R and R squared display when you run a regression. Stat wizards. If you have this set to on, an input provides syntax help for entering the proper syntax of certain statistical commands, and you have your set clock and your English language. Now, again, going back to the second function, if I want to remove this menu or go back to my home screen, I will press second and then the mode button, and that'll give me the quit function, and now I'm back to my home screen. Now let's say that a student has gone into the mode settings and changed some settings from their default options. For example, they changed their numbers to scientific formats, they changed functions to parametric, and we're working with complex numbers now. And they've also changed the language to Portuguese down at the bottom. For some students, this will be confusing for them, seeing parametric notation and seeing numbers that are written differently than from before. And when this happens, you'll want to instruct your students to perform a RAM reset. To perform a RAM reset, you can press the buttons second, plus, 7, 1, 2. That performs a random access memory resets, and that'll change all of your menu options or back to their defaults. This changes everything but the language. And so students will then, of course, just go down to the bottom and select their preferred language. And now everything will be back to normal. Normals will be formatted as usual, and stat editor will be back to just simple y equals. Okay, now that we have some of the basic keys and functions shown, let's perform some basic calculations. We'll start with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We can add on the TI-84 plus calculator as shown, like for example 5 plus 3. We can hit enter and it'll give us a sum of 8. 10 minus 2 will give us a difference of 8 as well. 4 times 6 will give us a product of 24. And 12 divided by 3 will give us a quotient of 4. Now, we can also use parentheses. Parentheses are essential for controlling the order of operations. I can say 8 plus 3, parentheses 3 times 9. And then I can add another 9 minus 6 times 8. And that's expression is equivalent to 113. There are also square and square root functions. So we can calculate the square root by pressing second and then the x squared button. And then 9 will give us the square root of 9, which is equal to 3. If you would like to perform a different root, then we can press math. We can scroll down to option 5. And now we can select the fifth root of 258, which is approximately 3.04. Next, we'll cover how to enter exponents and use scientific notation. To enter an exponent, we'll press a 5, then the caret option, and we can enter any numerical exponent, like for example 6, to get 15,625. And we can enter in scientific notation using the E. So for example, I can say 8 second and the comma button to get E for your scientific notation, and 6. This represents 8 times 10 to the 6th power. Let's learn to switch between fractions and decimals easily. I can input 8 divided by 9, and when I press enter, it converts to an approximate decimal form. But let's say it doesn't. When I have the fraction 8 divided by 9, I can hit the math button, and then the first option gives me approximate to a fraction, or I can click the second option, approximate to a decimal. And when I press enter again, 8/9 approximated to a decimal is again equivalent to 0.89. I can also do the same for a decimal to a fraction. For example, 0.125. I can press math, option number 1, approximate to fraction, and 0.125 as a fraction is equivalent to 1/8. We can also perform operations with fractions directly. I can press 2/3 plus 1/3, and that gives me an equivalent answer of 1. And I can also press, if you see here, this green function above the X button is a fraction. So I can press alpha and then X, and now it gives me the same fraction. I can press 2, I can press down, 3, and then I'll move over to the right, plus alpha X, 1/3. And when I press enter, it also gives me an answer of 1. Now, I'm going to go ahead and clear everything we have here. And so I'll press the clear button. This just takes my home screen, gets it nice and neat. And let's move forward with graphing a basic equation. To graph a basic equation, we'll press y equals up in the top left, and we'll enter an equation. For example, I have 2x plus 3, and I'll hit enter. Now, to actually see your function graphed, you'll go over to the graph button on your calculator in the top right, and and you'll have a graph of that function. I'll go ahead and save that picture or that graph right here. When I press y equals again, and I can change my graph to something like 0.25 x squared plus 6x minus 3 to graph a quadratic function. Now, you can see that this quadratic function and this linear function actually look pretty similar here. And what we need to do is adjust the graphing window for a better view to really see the difference between these two functions. So in order to adjust the graphing window for a better view, we're going to click the window button above mode, and we can change the minimum x and y values, including their scales. So I'll change the minimum x value to -100, the maximum to +100, with a scale or distance between the tick marks on the axis of 10, and then I'll repeat these same numbers for the y-axis. I'll press enter now, and when I look at the graph, I can see a better depiction or a better view of that quadratic function. Now, we can access the table feature by pressing second and graph to see the table of values set up specifically for our function. This would be for our quadratic function. And we can adjust our table values by saying second window. We can say our table start. Let's say if I want to go to a specific value of 200, and I can say change in table values by 5. And now when I go to the table, it starts at 200, and I have intervals of 5 instead. For the last function of the calculator today, I would like to show you storing and recalling values. We can store values for later use with the store button in the bottom left. For example, I can press 5, store, and I'm going to store the value 5 as the variable x. Press enter. And so now whenever I press 6x, my calculator knows that x really has a value of 5, and when I press enter, it now recalls that value and multiplies 6 times 5 to give me a value of 30. With that, we've covered the essential functions of the TI-84 Plus calculator from basic arithmetic to graphing. Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned for our next videos where we'll dive deeper into the features of your TI-84 Plus calculator and how to incorporate the TI-84 Plus calculator into your teaching to reinforce algebraic skills. Thanks for watching, and happy teaching.